Just recording this video to show you guys all the aspects of your character sheet and what this all means. I'll take it from top to bottom, I guess. So one of the most important things here are these ability scores. You'll see that there's the stat, like your actual ability scores here, the 14, the 16, the 14, 18, 12, and 10. And then what's above it is the ability modifiers. And these modifiers are what are going to play into your character a whole lot more than the scores itself. The way you calculate the modifiers from the scores is you take the ability score minus 10 and then you divide it by 3. So with this 14 here, you would minus 10, making it 4, divided by 2, it is now 2. And however, if you had like an odd ability score, say this was like a 15 instead of a 14, then you'd have a 5 divided by 2, it's 2.5, however, we round down from there, so it would still be a 2. Your proficiency bonus is essentially a measure of how good you are at things that passively levels up as you do. If you look over here, this proficiency bonus side, you don't need to worry about the proficiency die. That's how it will scale. So once you hit level 5 it becomes a 3, once you hit level 9 it becomes a 4, and so on. And that proficiency bonus is added to anything that you have proficiency in. Your walking speed is how far you can move in combat, pretty simple. These saving throws here are pretty important defensive rolls. If you were to get caught in the AoE of a spell, if you were targeted by like a grappler, if you stood on a trap, you might need to make one of these. To put it simply, your dex saves, your constitution saves, and your wisdom saves are the most important ones. You don't need to worry as much about your strength, intelligence, or charisma saves. Those come up a whole lot less often. A dex save would be something like you stood on a trap, dodge these arrows that are flying at you now, or a wizard is shooting a fireball at you, try to dodge it to take less damage. Constitution is a bit similar to Dex in a few ways, but they're used in different circumstances, and the effects of the attacker are usually a bit different. So this is more to do with like poisons, cold attacks, but also concentration. Concentration is very important for spell casting, which I will get to in a moment. Wisdom is more for like when you're being attacked with like a control spell. If you're getting hypnotized, if they're trying to put some sort of debuff on you, then you might need to make a wisdom saving throw. These are your skills down here. They're very important. These are basically a measure of what your character can do. And also, if at any point you want to know more about anything specifically, you can just click on the name and it'll give you a little description of what it is. These are basically how you do things. If I wanted to climb up a ledge, I might need to make an athletics check. If I wanted to recall some piece of information, I might need to make a history check. If I'm trying to look around, see what I can find, it might depend on whether that's a perception check, or it could be an investigation check. More or less, just wait for your DM to tell you what to roll. Or you can use this as a kind of prompt, saying, can I do this, and so on. Your skills are based on, well, the amount of bonus you get to your skills, these numbers on the side, is determined by your ability scores. So an acrobatics check takes your dex modification, your modifier. An arcana check takes your intelligence modifier. An intimidation check takes your charisma, and so on. And there's also this proficiency. If you can see it here in red, That means you have proficiency in it. That means you've taken it during your character creation as a proficient skill, and you will add your proficiency bonus to it when you make the roll. Here in D&D Beyond, it will do that automatically for you. Same goes with the saving throws. They're based on their respective stats, but if it has the red circle, you have proficiency in it, and you will add your proficiency bonus. Your passive stats are a bit less important. More or less just maybe remind someone if it's extraordinarily high. These passive perception is more of a like a defensive thing if someone's trying to stealth against you, but they're sort of important. Initiative, this is what you roll when combat begins. You would roll it, and you take turns in the order of highest initiative roll to the lowest. Initiative is based on your dex stat. So rolling like a 10 is probably going to put you in the middle of whoever goes. Rolling a 20 is going to make you go first. Your armor class is essentially your character's defensive stat. Your enemy will try to roll a dice, and if that number they get is greater than your armor class, that will hit you. And same goes for the enemy. Your armor class can be based on a variety of things, but it's most often what kind of armor you're wearing and your dex stat. For a light armor user, like this character I have right here, Roger the Ranger, it is his dex stat, but he's not wearing armor, so I will equip some armor, and that will boost his armor class to 14. Being light armor, leather armor will give me a base armor class of 11, and then it will add my dex value. My dex stat modifier, that is. You always have a base of 10 if you're unarmored, and it will be like, if you have a negative dex, that will be minus like 1 or something, then that'll put you on 9. Something like medium armor, which I'll just grab here. This chain shirt. I will equip that instead, and you'll see my armor class bumps up to 15. That's because the chain shirt has a base armor class of 13, but being medium armor, it is 13 plus your dex to a maximum of 2. So I will not get all 3 of my dex mod out of this, I will only get 2. And finally, heavy armor. This chainmail. This is simply a flat bonus to your armor. It does not take your dexterity. However, my character is not proficient in heavy armor, so you can see he's getting a bunch of negatives here. So I'm just going to take that off and put on the leather. You may also find with some of the heavier armors, in some medium and heavy armors, it will give you disadvantage on stealth. What disadvantage is if you were to roll the check, you would instead roll 2d20, and you take the lower number. So if I roll 2 times, I might get a crit here, but I rolled a 7 and that's lower, so we take the 7 plus the 5 that I have. Oh, and because I've been adding a bunch of things to my thing, you'll see that we're using variant encumbrance, which means you can carry 5 times your strength score, not the modifier, and that has, you can just read up on the rules here. If you carry excess of 5 times your strength score, you are encumbered, which means your speed drops by 10. You pretty much never want to do that. You can see here, I'm losing out on 10 feet of movement, so I'm going to delete these, and it will make me unencumbered, putting my weight and walking speed back up to 30. Now, if, say, you wanted to attack someone, I'm actually just going to grab a long sword. Now, in combat, you can make a few actions. The most common one is usually the attack action or the spell action. you can see a list of actions in combat here. I suggest you read up on some of them. However, if I were to make an attack roll against someone, I would first see if I actually hit the target. First of all, I will have to be in range. Say I'm using my longsword here. I hit this hit/DC button, and that will roll. And if this number that you get is greater than the enemy's armor class, then you will hit them. And only if you hit them will you go on to make this attack damage roll. So this is the attack roll, and then if it hits, this is the damage roll. And so I would hit and then do 9 damage. Every weapon has like different tags, different like unique, well not all, they fall under like a certain dice. It has a dice plus a modifier. That modifier is based on your strength score, unless it has the finesse property, in which you can use strength or dex for that weapon. And a ranged weapon will always use your dex score. Your hit DC is the same. It's usually a strength, but if it's finesse, it will be dex. And then if you have proficiency in the weapon, you also add your proficiency bonus. So for this longsword, I have 2 strength and 2 proficiency, making it a +4 to hit. But you do not add proficiency to your attack rolls. A lot of this will be handled by the system itself, so you don't need to worry about it. You'll see here that I have a +7 to my longbow, and that's simply because I've taken the archery fighting style, which gives me a +2 bonus to attack rolls with my weapon. Health is pretty important. Most classes have like a different hit die. The way you can kind of remember it is most of the martial fighter characters have a D10, and this kind of determines how much health you have. Barbarians uniquely have a D12. Squishy casters like wizards and sorcerers have a D6, and people like rogues, clerics, druids, and warlocks and so on have a D8. It just kind of scales your health. The way we handle it, the way the system handles it, is that on your first level, you get the maximum number on this die as your health, plus your constitution, and then for every subsequent level, it is the average roll on that dice, rounded up, plus your constitution. I believe it's rounded up. And then those are added together to give you your hit point total. For every level you get another one of those hit die, which are most usually expended on a short rest. So you can see here, I can choose to expend up to 3 D10 plus my constitution for each of those. That's because I'm a level 3, I get 3 die, and +2 because I got 2 mod and constitution. On a short rest, these are basically for recovering your health. If you're just taking like a break for like an hour. In-game, that is. Not out of game. And you would get your hit die back on a long rest. You get half them back. If you were to hit 0 HP, if I could just say 21 damage, you fall unconscious, and you will then be making death saves. Each time on your turn, you will roll a d20, and if it is 10 or higher, it is a success. If it is 9 or lower, it is a failure. And what these mean is that if you get 3 successes, you are stable, you no longer have to make death saves, but you are still unconscious. Until you get brought back to 1 hit point or something. If you get 3 failures, your character is dead. Just dead. There may be some ways to revive someone, but I wouldn't count on it. If you are given any amount of healing, you immediately spring back up, and you are out of death saves. You've technically survived that. That's all good. If you go back down, I'll say I've gotten 2 successes, and I apply the changes. I go back down, I do not keep my successes. If I were to say roll like a crit, like a 20, I wish that was a 20. A 20 gives you 1 health point immediately. And so you're back up. However, if you roll a 1 on your death saves, it counts as 2 failures. So that's kind of dangerous. And now remember, death saves are death saving throws. So if there's any ability you have that says it gives you a bonus in saving throws, you would probably want to use it now. Additionally, if you fall unconscious, you lose your ability to make like actions in combat. You know, you can't really do anything. You lose concentration on your spells and whatnot. Speaking of spells, I'll move over to the spells. This ranger has a few pretty basic spells, but you can see some of their effects here. Look at this Cure Wounds. I suggest you always read what your spells do. Pay attention to how long they take to cast, what the range of your spell is, what your components are needed. So this V means vocal, it means you're speaking some magic words, and somatic means it needs the use of at least one of your hands. The duration is how long it lasts, and that's just where it comes from in the books. A creature you touch gains a number of hit points equal to 1d8 plus your spellcasting ability modifier. This spell has no effect on undead or constructs. What is your spellcasting ability modifier? Well, you'll see here, it has a +1 modifier. For the ranger specifically, that is his wisdom modifier. For other casters, like a sorcerer, that would take your charisma, and a warlock also takes your charisma modifier. If you were a wizard, it would take your intelligence, and yada yada, there's more people. Your spell attack is your modifier, your spell modifier, plus your proficiency. And that would be if you were to roll a sort of like attack roll. Some spells have attack rolls against people. That's your spellcasting ability plus your modifier, your spellcasting modifier plus your proficiency. And then the save DC is essentially what your enemies will roll saving throws against. You heard me say earlier, if a wizard was throwing like a fireball or something, it would have this set number, and the enemies have to roll a saving throw. If they get higher, equal to it, or higher than, then they succeed. If they get lower than it, as this person did here, then they would fail and take the full effect of the spell. A spell with concentration stays active, basically, throughout combat as long as you hold that concentration. What is that concentration? Well, say here you choose number, it's got the spell effect here, and so I've casted that on an enemy, but if I am, and I can keep doing that effect on the enemy every time, it activates. But if I get hit, then I have to roll a Constitution saving throw, and if it is not above 10, I lose concentration on that spell. 10 is the minimum you have to roll. It's either 10 or half of the damage you've taken. And the final thing I think I'll go over here is Inspiration. Sometimes Void gives that out. That just means you get advantage on a check, which is the opposite of disadvantage. Meaning you would roll 2d10, and you take the highest. I'll actually do it over here. Roll 2d10, there's a 1 here, there's a 12, you take the 12. And that would expend your inspiration. You can also get advantage on rolls for any other reason that is viable. You can even get advantage on like attack rolls. You cannot get advantage on damage rolls. Only d20 rolls get advantage. But most of this is d20 anyway. Yep, so I think that does it for the character sheet. And next I'll go on to how you, like, building a character, what that kind of all means.